what up? Welcome to the first episode of the National Film Society podcast. I'm Patrick, and I'm joined by my friend, actor, producer, director, restaurateur, Yuji Okumoto. What's up, Yuji? How you doing?
What's up? Wait. I'm your first?
Yep, my first, and hopefully not the last.
Wow.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, no worries, man. Thanks for having me.
So you've been in movies like The Karate Kid Part 2, True Believer, Better Off Dead, Awesome Asian Bad Guys, of course, and most recently, Cobra Kai. But Karate Kid Part 2, that was one of the most formative movies of my childhood. And I've always wondered what it was like auditioning for that role. And I know that before that you said that you were kind of a shy kid growing up, but then you'd had some roles and then all of a sudden Karate Kid 2 came up. What was it like auditioning for such an iconic role?
Yeah. This was back in 1985 is when we shot the film. The casting director, I had previously worked 2 films with her. One was Aloha Summer, and the other one was Better Off Dead. So it was, we had already had kind of this connection. So when the role of Chozen came up for Karate Kid 2, she thought of me and wanted me to come in to read for the role. She set up, of course, a meeting with my agent. And so I went in and met with her. And ironically enough, she for some reason thought I was, might have been too big or tall for the role because at the time Ralph was hadn't, I don't know, maybe he hadn't hit his growth spurt, who knows? But she just didn't want me to be too big. So when I went in to meet with John Avildsen, she said, "Oh yeah, when you come to the room, just kind of slouch a little bit, so, you're not as tall." And I said, "Oh, sure, I can do that. So I'm an actor. I can do anything." So I get into the room, and first thing John says is like, "Why are you slouching, man? I want a menacing guy. I want you to stand tall and, be this bully to Daniel-san." And I said, "Oh yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, I can do that." So, I'm standing up straight and doing my shtick. And, he's looking through his lens the whole time, because that's what he does. He videos everything. And then I went back in a second time with him and Jerry Weintraub and read for them. And then I got the call to, come out to Hawaii and start filming. So it was pretty amazing because not only is it a big project, big film, but we got to shoot in Hawaii.
How long was the shoot?
So I think in total probably 15 weeks. We shot probably six and a half in Hawaii, and then the rest of it we shot in Burbank, which was kind of, I'll say it's a letdown, right? You go from Hawaii first, and then you go back to Burbank to shoot the rest of the film. It's like, but I tell you, it was a great time. It's the 80s, right? I mean, it's the 80s was a great time for to be an actor because, back then they didn't have the so-called $25 million actors, right? They had, they had money to pay the actors, which was really nice. It was a good time because they kind of spread the wealth. It wasn't where, this is what you get. Sorry, take it or leave it, and in the 2000s, especially, that's what you heard. It's like, take it or leave it. So, but it was a great time.
After the audition, did you feel pretty good? Did you feel like you had a pretty good shot at the role? And also, were there, a bunch of other actors that you came up with that were going for this role as well?
Yeah. I mean, I felt pretty confident as far as what I did. I mean, you know, you kind of leave it in their hands. You do what you can. And, you know, as an actor, you can't beat yourself over the head with, you know, the audition process. You prep for it and you try and deliver the best you can. And then you have to move forward, because the worst thing as an actor, you cannot just hold on to all this stuff, because you'll drive yourself nuts. Um, I'll give you an example of, you know, leaving it in the room and saying, you know, screw it, this is it. I did a audition for a film called Blue Tiger back in the day, and this was after Karate Kid. But I just want to give you an example of how, you know, you want to give 100%, but sometimes, you know, it may not be your day, right? So I went in there and I had a lot of stuff going on in my life, but you know, you try to leave that shit at the door. I go into the audition. I sucked terribly. I mean, it was just, I fell on my face. That was terrible. So I went back to my car and I said, you know what? Uh, you know, in life, they always say you only get one shot at this and that. I said, you know what? I don't believe in that. I said, and I knew at that time I could do better than what I did. So I went back into the casting director's office, and the director was still there. Um, and I said, "Yo, man, I need another shot. Give me another shot at this, and I will deliver. I promise you. Let me give it another shot." And so he said, "Okay, you know, most actors would not do that. Most actors just say, oh, I screwed up, get in the car, beat yourself on the head, go home." So I, you know, did the audition, and later that day, I got the job. So that was one of those moments where, you know, you take a chance, you go for it. But you know, like I said, most of the time you go into the audition, you give it all you can, and then you just leave it and move forward. So
Right, for sure. So when you got the news that you booked the role of Chosen, do you remember how you reacted? Do you remember that moment?
um, yeah, I remember getting called at home, and they said, "Oh, just want to let you know that the casting office called and said that you got the job." And I honestly, I was super excited. But you know, at the time, you don't know necessarily how big the film is going to be. All I knew was, hey, where is it shooting? Oh, it's shooting in Hawaii. Whoo, you know, and that was honestly, that was my first gut reaction, because I have this affinity for Hawaii. I love Hawaii so much, that when I heard that they were shooting part of it in Hawaii, that's what got me excited at the time. Um, you know, and hindsight being 2020, I mean, you think about how lucky uh, you know, you are, because there was a lot of people that auditioned for it. I mean, they were looking in Japan, East Coast, everywhere for this particular character. And so for me to be able to get the role, I mean, it was a true blessing. So I thank my lucky stars. And ironically enough, you mentioned, did I know anybody else? Yeah, there was you know, the usual suspects in the room. You know, all the actors that you see at every audition, um, and the two uh, guys that played my henchmen also auditioned for the role of Chozen. So you know, it's a little odd and uncomfortable, you know, somewhat, because like, you know, but they were great. Had a good time with my boys.
Did you know Tamlyn Tomita beforehand, or did you guys actually meet on the shoot?
Yeah, we met on the shoot. I mean, this was probably one of her, I think, first gigs, if I'm not mistaken. She just had done the whole Miss Nisei week and all that stuff, and the whole pageant stuff, and she was chosen to play the role of Kumiko. and she was great. I can't imagine anybody else playing it. She was, she had the look, she had the vibe, she had ties to Okinawa, so it was really cool. So that was the first time I had met her, and you know how she is, right? Because we all worked together on your show. She is just a guy, you know, and I mean that in the most positive sense. She she's just somebody you could just chill and hang out with, and it was just like one of the guys.
Did you guys have to compare accents that you had to have in this movie?
No, we did not. Because I think with I don't know, certain influences that you may have in your life, as like say the character, we all might have grew up different ways. So we never really compared accents. She had her way of saying it. I had mine. Danny, of course, Kamikona, who played my uncle, had his way, which was, and you know, he was the whole samurai thing.
So on the Karate Kid Part Two shoot, what was maybe the toughest scene for you to shoot in any way, emotionally, physically, whatever, just as an actor?
Trying to think back if there was any moment like that. I mean, because honestly, I was just, uh, so almost every scene was about me just brutalizing, Daniel San, talking smack to Mr. Miyagi and, all that stuff. So the only thing that I could think of that I feared for my life was when Tamlyn threw that tomato. Uh, I don't know if you know Tamlyn. She played ball, and so she has a good arm. And I remember the tomato whizzing by my ear on one of the takes. I said, "Damn!" uh, no, but in all honesty, trying to think of anything that really was stood out. I mean, there was one scene, where I felt kind of uncomfortable because of what my character was doing, which was there was a scene at the dojo where I go in with the spear and I knock the shrine off the table, and
Mhm.
so the props department, and granted they do their job and put in all the things that's supposed to go in a little shrine and whatnot. And being that I'm Buddhist, I said, because this looks like a Shinto shrine and everything, I said, you know what? Do you mind emptying that out? Because I just would have this tremendous guilt of just doing this, and there's stuff in there, and I just felt uncomfortable about it. And they said, by all means, let's clear out the shrine. And so it was basically the shell, and that was all that I was knocking over. So that was one of the things where I thought, if I can, do my pay my respects to, uh, any religion, I thought, I'd rather be safe than sorry and just take out everything because
Mhm.
it just didn't feel right. And which is great. They were very respectful of that, and so that was the only moment. Everything else, there was never really anything emotional necessarily. The only time was at the end of the film where everybody seems to be against me and doing the rattle thing, and I thought, man, that's jacked up. I grew up in this town, and this kid comes in here, and this is what I get. So maybe that was maybe the only time that he really cares. And maybe when his uncle says, "You are dead to me," and whatever, and I run off and from the storm and all that. uh, Funny thing was when my grandpa saw the movie, and this is back in '86 when it came out. he saw the movie, and it's funny. He felt sorry for me too when everybody turned against me in the village, and I was pretty much by myself trying to, you know, regain my so-called honor. So yeah, it was interesting that he felt that way.
So the tomato throwing scene, that's pretty iconic. The one that you mentioned where Tamlin throws a tomato and it hits you in the back of your shirt. And you know, it's funny because like I remember watching that and it's like, oh, the dude he takes his shirt off and then all of a sudden he turns around and he's got the most massive pecs. Like he doesn't miss pec day. Uh, what the hell, man? Did they make you like do 1,000 push-ups before that scene?
Yeah, it's funny because I was kind of the skinny, scrawny kid growing up, and it wasn't until probably high school that actually started to work out a little bit. And you do martial arts, as a kid and whatnot. But to put on that kind of a little more bulk, you'd have to hit the weights. So for Karate Kid, I pretty much just hit the gym. I hit the gym almost every day as part of my routine. I get up early and hit the gym. Uh, uh, Crazy enough, I ate whatever the hell I wanted, which is crazy because you can't do that now, of course.
Nope.
But back then, I had such a high metabolism that it was harder for me to keep the weight on uh, than just losing weight. So I just had just keep eating, and then I just worked out all the time. And as far as my pecs, I mean, that's the one thing that blows up. Oh, and my arms blow up. So it's crazy how those two body parts just blow up as soon as I start working out. That's kind of what happens. But who knows? Maybe I was doing push-ups on the side, just to get that pump.
Yeah.
We shot that scene,
Yeah.
right? And I think I was trying to just get cut, so I wouldn't have any flab or anything on my gut. But man, I just pretty much ate what I wanted, and just worked out.
Was it a requirement by production to get really bulked up, or was it something you just decided to do to be that menacing villain compared to Ralph Macchio's scrawny Daniel LaRusso?
Yeah, they didn't require anything. They just, um, they didn't really say anything because maybe they knew that I would, do the work or whatever. But nothing was ever said to me about, oh, you got to go to the gym all the time and blah blah blah. I just pretty much just did it, and
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't like I was doing heavy weights necessarily, because if you do too much heavy weights, then you become, too big and slow and all that. So I worked out, but I did a lot more of reps as opposed to doing, heavy
Mm-hmm.
weights because
Right.
I thought it kind of fits the character better because he's a martial artist. That if he was more lean and as opposed to being like Bolo. I mean, I don't want to be like Bolo. That guy was huge, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah, he
just
was.
kept that kind of physique throughout the whole show.
In another universe, Chosen is probably a sumo wrestler.
Dude, I just watched this thing on, is it ESPN or something? I forget, but they had this special on sumo wrestlers. I have tremendous respect for all those dudes, man.
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap. I had
For
no
sure.
idea the kind of regiment they have to go through, how much they have to sacrifice to be a sumo wrestler. I mean, they don't get paid well because they're just stuck in these sumo kind of schools where you cannot leave. That is your job 24/7. The young guys are cooking for the older guys, and it's just like this whole like martial arts ish kind of thing where you just, like the Shaolin Temple, you're stuck there. You cannot leave and no communication on the outside world. This is what you do. And it was pretty amazing to watch these guys because I think once you achieve a certain amount of success and you go on to get on the professional stage and whatnot. Then you're allowed to have a girlfriend, get married, have a somewhat normal life, because otherwise you're stuck in this almost like this temple, and you cannot leave. So it's pretty amazing.
That's crazy. I
Yeah.
would definitely pay money to watch that multiverse version of Karate Kid Part 2 when Chozen is a sumo wrestler. So the tomato throwing scene, how many takes of that did you do? Was it a one shot deal, or did you have to do it several times
Oh,
and use multiple shirts over and over and over again?
well, they did have multiple shirts on that day just in case. But she pretty much nailed it. There was maybe three, I want to say, that were thrown. Two, I guess, hit the mark, and then the other one, was by my ear. But yeah, she has an arm though; she can throw, and I think she played softball or whatever, and so she's quite the athlete. But yeah, it's funny how much you think about perspective, right? Wardrobe,
Mm-hmm.
um, on that show was kind of important for Chozen's character, also for Danny Kamakona too. He had those really sharp suits and
Yeah.
just really super
Mm-hmm.
tailored. But yeah, I mean the amount of money that they spent, my God, just those silk shirts alone. Some of those shirts, I mean, back in '85, you drop maybe $300 on one of those shirts, right? And they were long sleeve, some of those shirts. So they had to cut the sleeve off, put a band on here, tailor it to my body. And, by the end of at the end of the day, I mean, who knows how much each of those shirts, cost because of all the tailoring that they had to do. So, who knows, 1,000 a shirt or, you know, whatever it
Damn.
it was not cheap. And, you're talking multiples of those. And I'm thinking, God, man. And everybody asked me, did you keep any of those shirts, or, whatever happened to that gi? Man, that gi was badass. And I said, man, I wish I had, but, I just felt like this is their property, and, this is not, I can't just walk off with shit, so, and I said, nah, don't want to, ask, right? So the gi is the one thing that I wish I had just asked and said, can I buy like one of the doubles of the gi? Because that thing was
Yep.
badass. Wow. The
Definitely.
amount of tailoring and time it took to put that thing together, because I had done one for Halloween or whatever. My buddy had put this gi together because he said, I'll do it for you. And then, so he did it with highlighter, yellow highlighter and markers. He got a ruler and just put those lines in. Well, you think about the kind of work that actually went into that gi. It was actual piping that they put in there, piping
Wow.
each one of those,
Wow.
things, the black strands, and they crisscross and stuff. I mean, those things were just in there, sewed in there, and just meticulously done. And the collar, just, man, I tell you, that thing was amazing. And I wished I had, purchased one of the doubles, because yeah, that was badass.
They should have just given you one. Do you know if any of them still exist?
I'm sure I'm sure it's still maybe at the studio, or maybe somebody walked off with it from wardrobe. Who knows? But man, that's the
Sure.
one that got away, and I wish I had kept that, or purchased it. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, in Awesome Asian Bad Guys, it was also just marker, right?
oh,
The
yeah,
lines and
yeah,
the
yeah.
pattern.
And I wish so. I found so I know that the wardrobe was asking me whether or not I had that gi, and I said no. But a buddy of mine did one for me for Halloween, and but for some reason I could not find that sucker, and I was so bummed because it'd be kind of funny that it is like that hodgepodge kind of gi. But then
Sweeted.
I think it was after we wrapped, and might have been like a couple months later. I actually found that sucker, and I have it, in my closet, and
Nice.
it actually looks not bad from a
Nice.
distance. Yeah. So if you ever, do this thing, I have it. So
I will. I will make note of that.
yes, yes, I will make sure I store it away and keep it in a safe place.
Vacuum sealed.
Yeah.
So at the time, did you think that Chosen was going to be this iconic character? Because he was really unique, right? As a villain, as a bad guy, he wasn't just some random dude with guns or knives and yelling stuff. He was like this really, really well put together, with the high waisted slacks and the silk shirts and everything, and the glistening hair and whatnot. Did you get a sense that this role was unique at the time?
Yeah, during the '80s, that was kind of the heyday for a lot of nerds, right? They had Revenge of the Nerds, and they had Gung Ho, and I forgot what other, kind of 16 Candles,
Yep.
right? And they had a lot of those kind of roles out there. And when I read uh, the script, I thought, wow, this is really cool. There's actually a role that is a strong Asian American character or Asian character, um, and that was kind of rare during that time. So for me, I was really stoked to be able to have that opportunity to play that character. And the thing about it was, I wanted to have a sense of fun with him. Not only is he, menacing and whatnot, but I think he kind of relishes that role, right? And he has fun with it. And he has that. He doesn't. He doesn't really care. There's no boundaries, right, for him. So I think when I had that one scene where I go into, ironically, is breaking down that shrine, knocking it off the table. I come out with a spear, and just like your sensei teach you how to fight with spear. It's kind of that sense of fun. I'm gonna f you up, pretty much, with a smile on my face. You know, and even before that moment, I say to him, come here, I want to show you something. I did it with this big smile on my face. And so those moments to me at least give this character a little sense of fun. I think it sometimes when you think about bad guys, when they smile, it's even scarier than when they get that game face, mean face, whatever. So I thought, oh, there's different colors, different facets to this character than just the one color of I'm going to get you, all that stuff. I think I think that's
Yep.
why you know John Avildsen, to his credit, he says, yeah, just enjoy this moment, relish these moments, have fun, and also I have Pat too. Pat, Morita was such a wonderful man and such an inspiration, right? He would always be a mentor to me and say, look, man, this is your chance to shine. you know Enjoy it, work your ass off, um, but have fun. These moments, try something like this. And so he would always be there, and he would look out for not only myself but also look out for Tamlyn. So he was always wanting to be that true Mr. Miyagi for the younger generation. And so I had tremendous respect for Pat, and also tremendous respect for John Avildsen, who was an Academy Award winning director. So uh, I was in a good place, and of course, I loved working with Nobu McCarthy, who was such a sweetheart. She was one of the nicest ladies, and would also give advice on not only the acting but also life. So when these people talk, and you listen, and hopefully with all the lessons I've learned from them, you know maybe one day I can pass this information on, and help the new generation of young actors or filmmakers out there, and impart what they taught me, which is a lot of really wonderful things.
So the movie comes out in 1986. Did you get a sense of how big it was going to be while you were shooting it, or when did you actually realize it was going to be such a popular movie?
Um, you know, we didn't have a premiere for this movie. Uh, I don't know why they didn't have a premiere, but or maybe they did. Maybe it was in New York or wherever, but I never heard about it. I think my invitation was probably lost in the mail or something. Who knows? But uh, we as a collective, the actors that were based in LA, we all decided, hey, let's make our own kind of party. Let's make our own kind of premiere. So we all talked amongst each other, Tamlyn and the guys, my henchmen, and some of the other folks that were based in LA. And Tamlyn says, my dad, of course, is a cop, and so maybe he can escort, do a police escort to the theater. So we just went to this theater in Westwood, uh, and it was one of the big theaters in that area. And so it was playing Karate Kid, and this is, I think it was the first night or whatever. So we decided, what the hell, we'll just crash this thing, right? So we rented these
Yeah.
limos, and we just drove to this theater, pulled up in front, cops were there, and then we get out, and then people were in line and going, who the fuck are these guys, right? And then, people were coming out of there like, oh my God, oh shit, they're, reacting to us going in. And
Were you guys like dressed up nice?
yeah, kind of, we dressed a little bit, and we go into the theater and we watched the movie, and it was really a great time. But you kind of have to make the best of anything on your own sometimes, because I don't know why, but Columbia decided not to do a premiere. So
Mm-hmm.
anyhow, we did that, and the audience reaction was just amazing. It was so cool to be amongst people that are seeing it the first time, just like we were seeing it with an audience for the first time. And yeah, it was very surreal. Um, at the time we thought, wow, this is pretty freaking cool. Not knowing how big it's going to
Mm-hmm.
eventually be,
Right.
because that's how back in the day. I mean, and even today is film successes are based on box office, right? Or eyeballs, or whatever you want to call it nowadays. But back then it was based totally off of theater, and it did really really well that first week. And I
You got my money, my
yes,
parents'
thank you
money.
for going multiple times. Um, so I think I might have gone to Hawaii to see it in Hawaii too, at one of the theaters there. And it was same thing. I was like, and in Hawaii, ironically, is where my I guess fan base is, because there's so many Asians there
Yeah.
that they embrace the character. They didn't see him as the bad guy, and it was a different perspective when I went there. They thought, yeah, he's an asshole. But then at the same time, they thought there was not that many characters that were portrayed as a strong Asian American male. So, uh, I think in Hawaii, that's where I was pretty much well received. But here in the States, everybody said, "Oh, you're that asshole that was in." It's like, oh yeah, it's like, can I get your autograph?
So was the Westwood screening that you went to, was that the first time you saw the movie?
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's where Tamlin's dad pulled up in his cruiser, and yeah, we pulled up in limos, and yeah, that's where we saw it. Sorry, this popped up.
Wow. I'll be honest, if I were in that position, I would go to every screening and just stand outside being like, "Hey, how's it going?" That's me.
Oh man, no, I just it kind of didn't bother me. I liked a little bit of that anonymity, because not to say that, phew, man,
Hmm.
to be on the level of, let's say, Pat Morita, even Ralph Macchio too. I mean, they both probably got swarmed by fans, autograph seekers. I went out to dinner in Hawaii with Pat, and this was during the filming of Karate Kid 2, and I'll never forget how gracious he was to people, even though we're having dinner, and they will all come up and say, "Can I have your autograph? Can I take a picture with you?" and whatnot. And he would say yes. Sometimes he'd just say, "Oh, do you mind if we finish our meal, and I'll be happy to sign whatever, take a photo with you." So from my perspective, uh, it was kind of nice to have people come up and say, I thought you were a jerk. You played the character really well. I hated you, and so you did a great job. To me, those kind of people, that made me feel really, really good, because those are the true fans that really appreciate
Hmm.
what you do. And
Hmm.
there's that understanding of, yeah, we're not assholes, we're just playing a character. um, but yeah, I
Right.
would get the same kind of thing where you're eating dinner and people would come up and say, "Can I please take a photo with you?" And of course, it's hard for me to say no. you know so I take a quick photo and then go back to my meal. And if I'm with somebody, they'll step in for me and say, "You know what, can we eat first, and then
Hmm.
I'm sure you'd be glad to take a photo with you or sign whatever afterwards." And so that's what my friends would do for me. But yeah, it's weird how when you think about where my life was prior to Karate Kid coming out. I mean, that definitely did put me on the map.
So after Karate Kid 2 comes out, all of a sudden you're famous, everybody knows who you are. I guess out of curiosity, like what level of fame, like how did it change? Say you before Karate Kid 2, you were at maybe like a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, and after the movie came out, where would you put it?
You know, like I said, it's all perspective. Uh, Comparing me to somebody else that had done a huge body of work, uh, that they were, recognizable movies and big films and whatnot.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, maybe a 6 or 7 on a scale where um, the recognition bounced up. But you know, once again, if it were today, I think it'd be a little different because of the immediacy of social media and all that stuff. I think it'd be a little crazier. But if you don't see the movies, right, then you wouldn't know me from Adam. So I think it bumped up. probably 3, 4 notches compared to what it was. Um, but uh, I think it's how you carry yourself too, right? If you want to be recognized, you'll be recognized. If you want that, if that's what you want, I could walk around with a pair of, shades that are, crazy, or, have my hair a certain way, have my, silk shirts, have,
Or no shirt.
yeah, or no shirt, wearing gettas or something like that, making noise to draw attention to myself. But I don't know. I've never been that type of person where I like to draw attention like that. I figured, I just want to do the work and let the work speak for itself. And, whatever happens after that, I mean, I have no control over. And as long as I live my life the way I want to live it, then, I think uh, you won't get all that, peripheral things that are coming at you. I do enjoy, you know, I do enjoy my life as it is, right? Um, the rest of the stuff, uh, I appreciate because of the fans. They like what I did, but as far as anything else, I mean, I don't seek out that attention.
Did you ever get any free meals out of it?
Uh, Probably like free desserts or something like that. Little extra perk or something like that. But uh, yeah, uh, it it is nice that they recognize your work and appreciate your work and say thank you or whatever. And you know, um, yeah, it makes you feel wow special, but at the same time, there's no expectations, right? You don't you don't make it a point to start talking at the table. Yeah, when I did Karate Kid 2 and played Chozen, you don't. It's not what you do, right? And you don't like. I don't try and draw attention. I know some people that shall remain nameless that talk really loud at the table to draw attention to themselves and say, "Oh, it's like, come on, really?" So I'm not that guy.
So you had to have an accent, of course, in the movie. How often on the mainland, and
Oh yeah,
how often would people come up to
yeah.
you and be surprised that you're American, or say something like you speak really good English or that you don't have an accent? Because to this day, I'm sure people still say that. I have some old YouTube videos of you, and a lot of the comments, there's always people who say, "Wow, he speaks really good English."
Oh my god, yeah, that happens quite a bit. You do sometimes you talk shows and whatever at at Karate Kid's heyday, and it's funny how when you start opening your mouth, they go, "Oh, wow, I didn't expect that." It's like, seriously, dude, I was born in Hollywood, California. What do you expect? But there's a lot of people that say that same thing. Oh, you speak really good English. So I guess it's a testament of how I did as an actor and how believable I was. So, I'll take that. That's fine. I think people just don't know. They just don't realize, and uh, you know, you're basically tied to certain characters, uh, and that's how people believe you as a person. Uh, you know, Interesting though. I have had many people. In fact, there's a little girl I was flying back from, I think, back east on one of these junkets, and this little African American girl sitting next to me, and she said, she made that same comment, and I thought, wow, that's really crazy that you actually think that I am from Japan, and because of the way I talked in the movie. And she goes, yeah, I didn't realize that you were, you know, and even when you aren't recognized, you still get that. So it doesn't matter, right? You know, when you start talking, and or even on the
Mm.
phone, they see Yuji Okumoto, and then I start speaking, and they go, "Wow, you speak really good English. Where are you from?" I said, "Are you serious?" You know, and especially back then, in the '80s, uh, it happened quite a bit. There was an acting class that I went to, and um, I was what they call a ethics officer. So basically, I would make sure that everybody stayed on task, did their scenes, scheduled the scenes with me, so I'd have a list and all that, which I hated doing. I just, but it was free tuition, right? You just do this, and you get to still do your scenes and whatnot, but you just got to do all this other crap. And I kid you not, this one girl who was a famous um, athlete, Olympics, she was in this acting class, and she literally turned around in her chair and looked me straight in the eye and said, "Oh, you know what? I have a Japanese friend."
That's it.
That was it. And I said, "Oh, well, good for you." It's like, are you serious? What is, And then you get I have a Japanese friend. You might know them. Like we all know each other. Oh man, I tell you, sometimes it is nuts when you think about it.
Okay, after Karate Kid Part 2 came out, and it's a big movie, how did that change your expectations for roles as an actor? And were those expectations met? Were there challenges? How did that all kind of play out? What was like the aftermath of playing Chozen?
Um, you know, when Karate Kid came out, I thought maybe my life would change for the better, and as far as an actor, but it was all the same. That's all you get offered were bad guys. And
Mm.
not to say that it was a ethnic thing or anything like that. It wasn't because I was Asian. I think Billy Zabka had the same problem. Billy played such a believable asshole that all he got offered were bad guy roles too. Jerks, rich jerks, whatever. But yeah, I thought it would change and be better, but it's the same kind of thing. And I for some reason there was you know one casting director who was doing this film, and it was called True Believer, and it was with James Woods and Robert Downey Jr. And they called me to come in and audition for this movie. And I read the script and I said, "Dude, I got to get this role. It's such a great role. Even though he's kind of a bad dude, he was different." And so yeah, I really pursued this one because I really, really wanted it. And subsequently, sometimes when you really want something really badly, then you kind of hamstring yourself into trying too hard to get the role, right?
Hmm.
So I don't mean to segue into this story, but it's kind of a funny story as far as how you how far, what length you get to go at a certain point where you're pushed to the limit, and you just say, you know what, I'm done with this, shit or get off the pot. Uh, and so on the fifth freaking audition, I go in there with this totally different attitude because, they saw what I can do, right? And I thought that should be good enough, right? But they said, no, I want you to come in one more time, and please just come in and blah, 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 And I said, okay, fine, I'll go in. But in my mind, I had this attitude like, F you. I'm going to come in, and if this, is what you want, then this is what you're going to get. because I don't give a shit anymore. If you want to go a different way, fine, but don't yank my chain. So I go in there with this attitude, right? And I bring them, I'm holding the sides of material, and I start the scene, and I had this cavalier kind of like, whatever, I don't give a fuck, and I'm just saying whatever, and then doing the dialogue, and then I literally finished the audition. I threw down the sides and I said, fuck this shit, I'm out. I don't give a fuck. And I just walked out. And they said, whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on, hold on, hold on. Oh my God, come back, have a seat. And so that is what we wanted to see. And I said, well, why the hell didn't you just tell me? It would have been a lot easier. You just said, just bring it back, just don't, try too hard to be this guy and this and that. And I said, yeah, I could have done that, but I really honestly wanted this role so badly, and maybe I was pushing it. And so when I came in this last time, I said, I didn't care. I did not care. And sometimes when you have that attitude, that's what gets you the job. And so it was an interesting lesson, because sometimes when you want something so badly, you just have to let it go, and that's no truer words were spoken when somebody said, yeah, sometimes you just have to let it go. And so it was really kind of a turning point for me, as far as sometimes when you put all your eggs in one basket, as actors, it's a tough life. We all want to work so badly because it puts food on our table first and foremost, right? But it's also a passion of ours, right? To be able to put ourselves out there for people to see. And as I transitioned out a little bit to do a restaurant, my focus became more about the restaurant than the acting. And so it kind of took the onus off of the whole audition process, right? Because I didn't care anymore, because I knew that I had to put in energy to make this restaurant successful. I still understood that when you do an audition, you have to put 100% in. But then I didn't have that kind of, I got to get this, kind of attitude. I just said, you know what? If it happens,
Right.
it happens. So I think that gave me the freedom to do whatever the hell I wanted. And so it was kind of a liberating kind of feeling now, that you didn't have this weight on your shoulders saying, oh, you got to get this because you really want it. And then, everything became about that job. And, now it's just, I don't care. It is what it is. My restaurants are successful and doing well. And, the career is doing okay. I don't have to worry about, oh, I need to get this, I need to get that, blah, blah, blah. I just, audition when I feel like it, as opposed to, oh, I need to do this. Right.
Right.
It's kind of a nice place to be. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to segue into all this other stuff, but
No, that's definitely true. I mean, desperation in anything, whether you're going out
right,
for a role,
right.
or trying to get a job, trying to ask someone out, you don't want to reek of desperation. So this thing with True Believer, that was completely spontaneous. That wasn't planned out at all.
No. It was in the moment. I think the frustration was building, and I think when I did the audition itself, I didn't care, whether or not I got it or not. So I think when I put that button on the leaving the room like that, it was a spontaneous moment. It wasn't like I planned to say "F you guys," but I think as the character, you kind of, that's part of the character that comes out, you know. I remember when I was shooting that film, uh, there was we shot in San, what did we shoot? Oh, Folsom. We shot at Folsom Prison, and we're on the third tier of this prison, in where all the cells are. And I'll never forget, there was a AD that was a female AD that was standing, blocking kind of the pathway to get to my cell where they were setting up the shot. So she was talking with this big, massive Howley guard that was standing there, and so I just basically put my hands on this AD, and I kind of pushed her aside. And says, oh, "Excuse me," and I walk, and this big guard grabs me by the arm, spins me around, and he said, "Don't you ever fucking put a hand on anybody in here ever. Do you understand me?" And I was already in character going to shoot this scene. I literally looked up at the guy and I said, and I kind of eyeballed him. I looked him up and down. I said, "Yeah, whatever." And I turned and walked away, and he was going to grab me again and just freaking light me up, right? And the AD girl goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, wait a sec. That is one of the actors. Don't." He goes, "Well, man," he said, "I came this close to cold cocking that motherfucker." And she told me the story afterwards, and I thought, "Oh, how funny that, you know." And apparently there was a guy in another uh, block that uh, I looked like, right? And so, I thought that was a funny story. And, but that's the one thing, is like, you are in character. And during that filming of that movie, I was in character. I didn't, you know, that's what I did, man. I just played this guy. And I go outside in the yard, and this is at Folsom, which is a maximum security prison. And granted, they had people kind of shadowing us to make sure we were okay. And there was like this fence that separated us from the yard where the guys are all kind of doing lifting and whatnot. And they look over at me and they go, "What you in for?" And I'm like, acting. And so,
I'm in here for my acting skills.
yes. So yeah, it was one of those moments where I just was not going to come out of this character. I just was focused, because I really believed in this project. And when you get a chance to work with somebody like James Woods and Robert Downey Jr., it was quite a massive opportunity, right? And Woods was really incredible to work with. And you talk about an actor that is there for you, when you do your off-camera stuff. And I mean, I've always been there for actors. I don't ever go and say, I'm going to leave. I'm going to be in my trailer. See you later. They could just have the script supervisor talk and do the dialogue. But I never did that. And James Woods actually was the type of actor that never did that. He would be there for the actors, give 100%, even though he's off camera, he would give you everything. And which was really special to me, because, when you think about certain caliber actors, a lot of them, maybe they don't do that kind of shit, but he was there and he said to me, "I'm only as good as you make me." So, which was really impactful. Granted, it didn't change how I did everything, because I still, from day one, I was always there for any actor that needed my off-camera dialogue, because at the end of the day, it's about the project as a whole. It's not just about your performance, it's about everybody's performance. So uh, you know those words stuck with me. And uh, it's something that I try to, pass on to people, because shit, I've done so many projects where, you know, people just leave. I did a project where 5 people were in the scene opposite me, and all those 5 people left after I did my off camera for them. They all split. And I'm thinking, wow, that's so nice. Not one of them stayed. And I basically had to act with a bunch of C stands, right? And I had to remember which actor was which actor. And then the script supervisor is saying all the dialogue. So I have to react to whoever's saying it. That's so and so. Okay. And that's so and so. That's, and then I did it. But it sucked, that they didn't stick around.
Mm-hmm.
But
right.
That's sometimes how this business goes. And that's why you got to, be ready for anything. And I tell you, it's always an adventure in this business.
When you're shooting in Folsom, when inmates would ask you what you're in for, what would you respond with? Would you actually say something, make something up, or just keep your head down?
Yeah. I mean, when you're in that situation, I think, you never want to ignore people. You have to respect people. There's that line that you have to draw. I was off the set. I wasn't on camera anytime soon. I was on this break, so I was just kind of to myself, and I was just kind of going over stuff in my mind, and so when they say that kind of stuff, I mean, you still have to answer with something respectful. You don't bullshit these guys, because that's not what you do. And so I just said, no, I'm just here as an actor. Oh shit, and then they just leave you alone. But you never want to be, create this animosity, this, because it's already pretty dark to begin with, right? And so, in fact, that day they had a shooting and they had lockdown. Yeah. Yeah. And so luckily we got out, because,
Wow.
when you go into shoot in a maximum security prison, they have a waiver that you sign. And what the waiver basically says is that there is a no hostage exchange policy. So if you get taken, we're not going to negotiate for your release. You're pretty much on your own. So when you sign that document, you go, oh, okay, well, let's do this and just hope for the best. And so when you're in there, that's why you got to think about these kind of things. You say, be respectful, because that's a big thing, in prisons is it's a lot of respect. So, when they ask questions and whatnot or whatever, you just be honest and answer their questions. But when you're on camera, or when you're going, and you have to, be able to flip that switch and get into character, and then go. Some of these, when I think about some of these young actors now that I work with, they're freaking amazing, man. They're just like blah, 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 and effing around, and they said, "Okay, we're ready and action." No, and they just flip on that switch. Pat Morita was one of those kind of guys where amazing. He was, God bless him, but he loved to party, and
I heard.
he was drunk one time in this one scene. And literally, he's like, "Oh, okay, what are you doing? Okay." And then they said, "An action." He goes, how many ice does he have to break, or whatever, And that particular scene, he was pretty sloshed, but he just boom, right into character, and it was amazing to watch, how these guys could just flip it on and flip it off, right?
He was drunk in the ice breaking scene.
He was pretty inebriated. He had his first lines of dialogue to me, and I was like, "Oh man, wow, Pat, late night," But yeah, he was notorious for having late night sessions, being out and about, enjoying himself,
Right.
which, dude, man, I mean, the guy lived a really full life, whether it's through the stand-up comedy, through the acting, whatever it was, partying and all that. I mean, he lived it to the fullest. So, yeah, he was quite the character. Love that man, and I miss him to this day. Wish he was still around. But yeah, he was really a great dude.
Yeah, it seemed like it. I wish I met him. Let me ask you, we're seeing a lot better, quote unquote, better Asian representation in Hollywood. Did you ever think that it would
Uh,
get to this point that, we're not all the way there? Nothing's perfect for sure, but it's much better than it was, say, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 2000s, because there were always a lot of stops and starts. We would hope that some particular movie would break through and whatnot, but then it wouldn't. So, did you ever think that it would evolve to this point?
yeah, I mean, we've all seen it before in the past where there were breakthrough Asian American movies that came out, and we thought, oh, maybe this is the opportunity for people to see that people of color can make a difference as far as box office, because at the end of the day, that's what it's based off of, right?
Right.
Popularity is based off of box office. And when films like Joy Luck Club came out, we thought, oh shit, this is going to be awesome for Asian American actors. Now we're going to see a spike in films about Asian American stories and whatnot. And I think it just came and went. It's almost like we missed that opportunity. We missed that bus. And um, so now, fast forward to some of these other films that are out there now or that are coming out. I think we just have to keep that momentum going in that direction. Uh, you know, whether it's through creating projects ourselves, or being ready to take on roles that are mainstream kind of roles and really performing and doing a really bang up job. Um, Being ready as a filmmaker to put in 110% and be better than the next guy. So I just hope the momentum continues, because we've seen it happen in the past, and hopefully it won't happen again. So yeah, I mean, we all try and do our part, and that's part of the reason why I had come on board to produce the Paper Tigers, is for that reason, because there was strong minority roles in there for especially lead roles for Asian American actors. uh, you just try and do your part and create these vehicles that um, you know make a difference, tell our stories. I mean, we've seen plenty of these martial arts films from Asia, but what about here in America? What is our stories? Whether it's family dramas, whether it's comedies, whether it's martial arts, action, whatever it is. Uh, what are what's our perspective? What's our story? And I think that's kind of the direction that I hope uh, our community is going. Uh, but let's just fucking keep this ball rolling, um, and not stop.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. It's almost like if we didn't have social media, social media obviously has its own terrible problems, but it's allowed, voices to speak up, to say, we want this, all kinds of voices, including Asian American voices. So, I wonder that if maybe if social media didn't exist, would it still be one of those things where it's like a stop and a start type thing, and it's just kind of the cycle that we get stuck in. But anyway, moving on. We live in a day and age kind of like a perpetual present, right? Like everything is accessible via the internet. So I'm curious, like, when did you get a sense that Chosen as a character was going to come back, or that he resonated with so many people? Basically, when did you get a sense that Chosen was making a comeback?
I actually did not have any clue. I mean, I think the fan base and my friends were actually the ones that just kept bugging me about why aren't you on the show, and
Cobra Kai.
you know this is a show that Chosen should be on, and uh, they need that Asian character that uh, that shows that perspective, and so I heard it all, and this is the first two seasons. They I heard nothing from them, right? So as they're prepping for season three, uh, they contacted my agent and says, yeah, we're looking at probably bringing back Chosen for season three. And they said we're going to send a script, and tell us what he thinks. And so it was one of those spec kind of scripts. uh, it wasn't a final or anything like that, but they wanted my opinion. So when they sent it to me, I read it, and uh, nothing against them, I think they're really good guys, but it wasn't the direction I thought Chosen should go. And the reintroduction of his character, I thought I just didn't want to do, because I think not only for the character, paying deference to the character himself, but also I think paying deference to the fan base of the expectation, and the Asian American community, all that stuff came into play. I didn't want to be this kind of apologetic character from the
No,
get go, right?
not at all.
Um, I wanted him to have some strength, because it's all about honor with Chosen, right?
Right.
And respect. And, you don't know what he's gone through for those 30 whatever years that he's been missing. So I wanted him to come on with kind of more of a bang as opposed to a whimper. And, initially they had me apologize to him and say, I'm sorry for everything I did, blah, blah, my past transgressions and whatnot. And I said, that leaves this character nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
If he's already there, then I don't want to, I don't want to go there. He has to come in as a, you know, as this proud dude,
Yeah.
right? So I sent my notes to the writers, and they're very precise, very to the point, and all the history that I included in that. And so they said, "Well, let us run with this before you say no." So they reworked the script, and they sent it back to me, and that version was so much better than what it was, because you know, like I said, I want this character to have some sort of progression, right?
Absolutely.
He can't come in from here, or here, and then have nowhere to go, right? So um, they listened to what I had to say, as far as how my perspective was for this character, and they implemented it. And from that point, I said, "Yeah, I'm down." So that's kind of how that whole thing went down, as far as me being involved with it. But I had no idea how they're going to incorporate Chozen into this Cobra Kai world, and no clue. So I figured, well, if it happens, it happens, and it happened, which was awesome. I'm glad, right? And Tamlyn too was on, so it was even better.
Oh yeah, totally. So coming back to Chosen, right? It's been 30, 35 years. Did you, I'm assuming that you went and created like a history of where he's been for those years, right? So how deep did you go to kind of like bring him from 1986 until now? I mean, you don't have to tell me, of course, that's private to you, but how far did that kind of research and kind of just like, chosen history in your mind go for you?
As an actor, we're always, uh, well, for me, I always do histories on a lot of the characters I play. Where were they before and where are they now? So each character you play always has some sort of history behind them. And it just kind of makes your character richer if you have all that backstory implemented into your brain, because otherwise, you're just kind of doing it on the fly. And for me, I just like to do all that homework before I step foot on any set. So, as far as Chosen, yeah, I did kind of have my own version of where he went during the that time from getting dissed on the by the villagers to the point of Cobra Kai. So I won't get into details, but yeah, I mean, I did a kind of history on what he had gone through, and I think that perspective when he came into uh, that season three was all there and kind of very real in my mind. And I think playing that character back in the 80s and kind of doing the history even back then, right, of what he was at the moment when this Mr. Miyagi and Daniel San get introduced to him, all the stuff that he had heard through his uncle and whatever, he now gets a chance to do this face to face. So how is he feeling about all that stuff? So yeah, I did a history back then, and I did a history for those 30 odd years that from the point of his disgrace to the present. And that's a lot of stuff to hold on to, right? Because that's the last moment that he had exchange with Daniel-san, was getting humiliated, and then they go off on their merry way, and I'm left to pick up the pieces of my life. So uh, there's a lot of quote unquote baggage, and probably a lot of hurt that he carried with him in dishonor for all those years. So, um, yeah, I kind of gave him a somewhat of my own little backstory of what kind of in my mind happened, and uh, also, yeah, like you said about the mental part of it too. I mean, how was his mental state after all this stuff happened? And you got to think about the situation and what he went through, and if you play that in your mind, how would you react to that as Chosen, not as me, but as Chosen? So yeah, it was a lot of digging deep into these dark moments that he had, because he was probably in a super dark place. Wasn't like all fun and games. Now, okay, everything's forgiven, and now I can move on. I was like, hell no. And so that's why it was important for me when I had this first encounter with Daniel San after all these years to kind of have a little bit of, I can, oh, if, because all the stuff I had learned over all those years, it ain't going to happen again. I'll take your head off this
Right.
time. So you have to have all this stuff playing underneath that kind of, oh yeah, okay, yeah, you know? So,
Final question. Final question. Do you have any kind of recommendation for an actor, filmmaker, producer,
oh,
restaurateur, even anything that's inspired you? Could be a book, a movie, a song, a saying, whatever,
my,
you know,
my journey.
like, yeah, like on your journey, right?
Okay. So as far as the restaurant, I tell people don't do it. Yeah. Honestly, if unless you have a true passion and can manage to do every aspect of the restaurant, whether it's bookkeeping, uh, cooking, having the front office, front kind of personality to meet and greet people. But yeah, I think that's what you gotta have a passion for everything and learn everything about the restaurant business, because any given moment shit can happen where all your guys in the kitchen walk out on you, and then what do you do, right? So you got to be able to do everything when it comes to restaurant. Now take that in producing, it's the same kind of thing, right? Where you have to uh, juggle and put out fires and all that stuff. So you have to be able to have that ability to multitask as a producer, right? As an actor, um, I mean, we I'll hit on that point about the True Believer audition and all that stuff about, not, having such desperation when you do these auditions. Just, come in there and just let it go and not worry about it. Not want anything that bad. I always tell young actors, you know, as far as dialogue is concerned, always say the lines like it's the first time you are saying it, not the 25th, 100th, whatever time that you said it in your, rehearsal about memorizing. Just remember every line has to be fresh and you're saying it for the first time. Also, a couple other things to remember. And I'm the worst at this. I'm a kind of a perfectionist, um, but I tell you one thing: perfection is the death of good acting, if that makes sense, right?
Yep.
So that's another thing. And then also one of the things that I learned from the very beginning was love art in yourself, not yourself in art. So
Nice.
yeah,
So true.
that's a famous
So
Russian
true.
teacher, Stanislavski, that I remember somebody always, repeating that mantra, that quote is super important, because you don't want to be in the business for the wrong reason. And always have a fallback plan. you know, I tell you, the restaurant business helped me so much because it took the onus off of the audition process. So sometimes it's good to have other passions, other things to, keep your mind occupied so you don't, bang yourself over the head over stupid auditions and whatnot. And there's one thing about failure, right? Uh, you know, Encouraging filmmakers to, if this is what they want, they should pursue their dream. But, you know, um, you should never let that fear of failure stand in your way, because you think about these Miyagi-isms, these quotes that Mr. Miyagi said. There are things that he said that are really important things that you can put into your everyday life. You may think, oh, how does that pertain to me? But you talk about the fear of failure. He says that one thing to Daniel-san. It's okay to lose to opponent, must not lose to fear. So you substitute opponent for life, and it's almost the same thing. So that's why, for
Right.
me, when you talk about Karate Kid, there's more to Karate Kid than just the film itself. I think all the things that Mr. Miyagi had imparted on Daniel-san, there are things in there that you could apply to your everyday life. And as far as
Oh,
real
totally.
quick, God, are there inspirations as far as filmmakers or actors that
I didn't expect you to hit on all the things. I was just expecting one of the things.
Oh
So
no, I go for it all, man. You ask me one, I'll answer all the questions that come along with it.
appreciate
Um,
it.
but yeah,
That's all great stuff, man. All great stuff. Well, thanks, man. Thanks so much for coming on to the show.
yeah.
Appreciate your time, man. Listeners, you can find Yuji everywhere on the internet and the socials at Yuji Okumoto. If you're in Seattle, drop by and check out his restaurant, Kona Kitchen, konakitchen.com. And you can also buy some cool new t-shirts, a collaboration with Yuji's friends t-shirt company from Hawaii. Of course, check out season 5 of Cobra Kai out on Netflix. Also on Netflix is Yuji's film Paper Tigers, directed by our mutual friend Bao Tran. And check out Yuji in a music video from the EDM band Odessa, a song called Love Letter. All of this will be linked up in the show notes below. And that, my friends, is the first episode of the National Film Society podcast. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Patrick Epino, E-P-I-N-O. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch this podcast and subscribe and see our smiling faces on YouTube at youtube.com/Patrick Epino. If you're so inclined, please do leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and also say nice stuff about the show in a review on Apple Podcasts. Music in this episode is provided by Paper Sun. The National Film Society podcast is produced by National Film Society. Duh. That's it.